Hey internets, there's a lot of videos and philosophical takes out there about what it means specifically to be weak-minded. What exactly makes up a weak-minded individual, how do you detect these people, etc, etc. And a lot of those takes, sadly, aren't very good. And the problem with them is that a lot of people, when you ask them what a weak-minded person is, they'll give you an answer that focuses on a lot of subjective personality traits. And so they'll attribute the label of weak-minded to traits they personally like and strong-minded to traits they don't like, with a particularly bad common LinkedIn normie slop example being attributing weak-mindedness to introversion and strong-mindedness to extroversion. Which, I mean, at that point, they might as well just say smart person is when person I agree with and stupid person is when person I don't agree with. Truly, the Socrates of our times. So yeah, not very informative. So in this video, I'm going to clear things up and explain what weak-mindedness actually is. It has very little to do with personality traits, but rather it has more to do specifically with a person's epistemology, and how there's a major difference between the NPC and an actual player character in how we view knowledge. Because all memes about some people actually lacking qualia aside, as interesting as a rabbit hole that may be, really being an NPC is just what we call people who are in a state of weak-mindedness. And epistemology, in an extreme oversimplified magical nutshell, just means how a person gathers knowledge and determines what beliefs are true. And if you study philosophy, you'll find that there are a lot of specific epistemologies out there, like empiricism, rationalism, foundationalism, etc, etc. Yet really, everyone has an epistemology, whether they know they do or not. We all have some way to determine correct knowledge, regardless of whether or not it's consistent. And what this has to do with weak-mindedness is very simple. There comes a line of reasoning, code in how humans think if you want an analogy, where we must make a final determination on whether or not something is true. For the player character, for the strong-minded individual, this is a very simple step. We just asked, okay, is this true? Does the knowledge gathered make sense? Do the facts line up? Does this make logical sense? Etc, etc. And if it does, the strong-minded person will just simply accept that knowledge as correct. But a weak-minded person, the NPC, they do something completely different. They ask themselves whether or not they are allowed to believe that something is true. The NPC, as the final error check of their epistemology, they have a social acceptability filter to their concept of reality. And so it's not just that they can't think for themselves, but rather it's more like their very concept of thinking itself is upside down. A weak-minded person, really, all they really want is that you just don't want to go against the grain. They want to fit into society, to the point that their fear of not fitting in is actually stronger and overrides their desire to be correct on things. And thus they adopt an ideology that being correct means fitting in. To the weak-minded person, these are actually the same things. A good way to understand this is to look at something known as the Asch conformity line experiment. It's an experiment where they gave people a very, very simple exam. They were given a set of lines and asked which line matches the length of the line that they're given. And it was designed to be a very simple spatial reasoning test. The correct answer was very, very obvious. Pretty much anyone normally will get it correct, so long as they're answering it without society interjecting. Because of course, again, the question is just designed to be intentionally easy. The real test is, can you still give the correct answer to a very easy question when you are surrounded by multiple other stooges who, to your knowledge, are also taking the test, but they're actually shills. They've been placed there to intentionally give the wrong answer. They will all claim that the answer is C, even if, say, the answer is obviously B. And so the real test is, can you still give the correct answer when you're surrounded by people who are giving the wrong answer and they're all giving the same wrong answer? And this experiment has been repeated numerous times, and what we've found through various meta-analysis is that men fail this test 1/3 of the time and women fail the test half the time. Now that right there is a very stern refutation of democracy. That is a lot of people giving a very obviously wrong answer, simply because they were socially pressured into doing so. And so it shows that a lot of people do indeed have this idea in their heads that the very concept of truth is the same thing as what society tells them. And again, it's not so much that they can't think for themselves, period, because given the same question alone from the Asch conformity test, well, then most people are able to get it right. So they can reason, they do have some kind of ability to think embedded into their epistemology. It's just that at the end of their theory of knowledge, they have that social conformity check. And for a weak-minded person, that need to socially conform overrides everything else. And this gives us an explanation for why it often seems like you're just kind of talking to a brick wall when it comes to some people. It's almost as if no matter how reasonable your argument is, they will continue to believe in nonsense so long as what you are telling them contradicts what the mainstream media has told them to think. I see it all the time. The NPC will twist and contort themselves into all manner of mental gymnastics, where there is no such thing as a logical fallacy that is too stupid for them to commit, so long as the end result for them is that they can still convince themselves that what the church of the current thing has told them is in fact correct. And when you realize this, when you realize it's their very epistemology that makes them think like this, suddenly a lot of weird behaviors throughout history make a whole lot more sense. Especially when you go deeper into this rabbit hole, which I'll do for you all right now by going over a couple examples that really emphasize just how bad this is. Like, for instance, people recently found out that 90% of hate speech online was actually directed towards white people and men. This was discovered as soon as Facebook implemented this sort of race-blind algorithm for detecting some lay racist hate speech. Now, for an ordinary person, for a player character, someone who can think for themselves, the answer to this is, oh yeah, of course, duh, obviously this was happening. If you had paid attention to modern discourse online in the last 15 years or so, or just to any level of degree, it's pretty obvious that that's where most of the quote-unquote hate speech was being directed towards, because of course hate speech directed at white men is considered politically correct, and thus it was the type of hate speech that's actually allowed, because it's the type of speech that doesn't really threaten the positions of the cathedral in any meaningful way, and so thus it's the type that you generally tend to see the most. Not exactly rocket science. And yet, strangely, when you take this fact and present it to an NPC, they will viciously deny it. They will try to say that zero demonization of the white man exists in any kind of public conversation or the media. And the reason why they do that, when you go back to understanding that this is within their epistemology, actually reveals itself to be something a little bit insane. It's not so much that they don't see the white man bad rhetoric that you see in the media and academia. Rather, it's because that rhetoric is considered socially acceptable and therefore within the grounds of political correctness, it therefore cannot be hate speech, and therefore it isn't happening. Or in other words, no hate speech against white men exists because it's not socially acceptable to accept what is being said as hate speech, therefore it's not happening. That's what the social acceptability filter does to a person's way of thinking. It's not so much that they can't think, but rather it just creates a contradiction in how they view truth through this lens of social acceptability. You're telling them it's happening and it's a bad thing, but to them, because the social acceptability filter tells them that it can't be happening because it's a good thing, they end up denying the entire thing outright. Or for another example, one that's a bit more into how they commit very obvious logical reasoning errors, can be found in this article I saw in Vice. Men on dating apps are aiming too high and science says it's time to stop. A new study has confirmed something most dating app users already suspected. Men are swiping way out of their league and it's not going well, claiming that it is men who are the ones who are too picky on dating apps. Now, the logic of this, when you look into it, is insanely stupid. It's one of the most nonsensical methodologies I've seen in at least the last 3 months. Their reasoning was that for heterosexual couples, they ranked everybody on desirability based on how many swipes they get, which for those of you out there who aren't familiar with what that means, it just means interested in moving on to the next step of dating, moving on to the conversation phase, is saying, okay, I find this person attractive enough to talk to. And of course, the problem with this reasoning is that, of course, women get way more swipes than men do. That's just a difference of how the genders use dating apps. And so what these guys did in their methodology was they took women's desirability level as given by their swipes from men, and then used that to say that all of these women are way more valuable than all of these men, and therefore men are aiming out of their league, which of course is ridiculous because these are heterosexual couples, meaning that it's men pairing with women, which means that you wouldn't want men to be competing with women in this kind of regard, because they're not. Rather, it makes more sense with heterosexual couples to look at the desirability and attractiveness of men versus other men and women versus other women, because that's just how heterosexuality works. So like I said, it's very bad methodology. It's one of those ones where you don't even have to be that intelligent to see that this doesn't really make much sense. Until, of course, you remember how NPCs think and how their epistemology towards truth includes that social acceptability filter. Within the Church of Correct Think, especially with kind of the trash lib mindset that Vice panders to, it is not politically correct to suggest that women are the ones who are more picky when it comes to online dating. And when you realize that, then suddenly this makes perfect sense. The fact that the methodology was just obviously irrational didn't really matter to them. It was a methodology that gave them some knowledge that was within line of their social acceptability filter. Because of course there's been many other studies that look at online dating, and they've all pretty much found that women are the ones who are significantly more picky than men. Because of course, when you rank men and women out of 10 on these apps based on the number of swipes they get in relation to the same gender, it becomes quickly apparent that women in the bottom 60% are ignoring men in the bottom 60% and are all just going after men in the top 20%. But the thing is, that goes against the feminist idea that women are the ones who are always the victims, and thus it goes against the politically correct narrative, and thus it's not acceptable. And so thus Thus, they must come up with a methodology that intentionally tortures the data until the data tells them something that is socially acceptable. And that just really emphasizes just how, for so many people out there, their need to fit in with the social order is so strong that it has overwritten their concept of reality. And so they will accept obviously flawed arguments in favor of agreeing with said social order. While any of your arguments, regardless of how well constructed, objectively consistent, and valid as those arguments may be, they'll just fall on deaf ears. You are, again, just talking to a brick wall. And so the solution for a lot of times is not to continue to waste your time with them, but rather it's far better to just call out their intellectual cowardice and then move on and just stop wasting your time. Anyways, that's all I have to say. Thanks for watching. Please like, share, comment, and subscribe. And if you like my content and you want to support me, you can do so on Ko-Fi, Subscribestar, or by buying some merch. Or by becoming a member of the channel either through here on YouTube or on my Subscribestar, which gets you first dibs on QA videos, which, by the way, there will be one coming up shortly this month. But yeah, for now, that is all. Thanks again. Till next time.